So real quickly, my name is Chan Hellman. I'm a professor at the University of Oklahoma. I'm a psychologist by training, and I've been doing HOPE work for about 12 years now. My work is primarily in the context of trauma and adversity. But before I get started in talking about hope and introducing the language of hope, the first thing that I want to say is that hope is good for everybody. The power of hope works really well for children, for adolescents, for adults. There's over 2,000 published research studies on hope that show that hope is one of the single best predictors of our ability to thrive. I've just focused all of my work on high trauma children and adults, and specifically looking at how nurturing hope can help children overcome adversity to achieve a future and a capacity to thrive. So just a little bit of an introduction. I do want to again repeat that hope is good for everybody. It's not just for trauma exposed kids. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and get started. So historically, as a psychologist, I basically was trained with this framework of trying to understand what is wrong with people. And so whenever I would work with a child or an adult, I would start with this framework, whether I asked the question or not, but it was from this idea of what is wrong with you. And that well-being, or that our ability to thrive, was based upon this idea that if I could reduce what is wrong with you, then that must be well-being. And what I learned as I began to discover hope is that the reduction of what's wrong with you is not well-being. It's not well-being at all. The reduction of depression is not happiness. It's not well-being. It is simply the reduction of what's wrong with you. As I think hopefully most of you are familiar with the adverse childhood experiences and sort of how that's emerging in our state as one of the more well-known and recognized frameworks for understanding adversity and trauma. It is really shifting the question that we have from what's wrong with you to a better understanding of what happened to you. Just real quickly, and again, I'm going on the assumption that most of you are familiar with the adverse childhood framework, but it's based upon this idea that if you've experienced one or more of these 10 adversities in your childhood, it has significant repercussions across the lifespan. And the basic pattern is that an increase in these adversities lead to an increase prevalence of risk behaviors, drinking, smoking, sexual activity, etc., which ultimately leads to these adverse health consequences long term. The idea is that you look at each of these categories, these 10 items, and simply if you have experienced this adversity, you get a score of 1. If you did not, you get a score of 0. And so an A score ranges from 0 to 10. The higher the score, the higher level of adversity. So I just really want to couch this adversity, and all of the research that we know about adverse childhood experiences is really based upon this national prevalence. And the Center for Disease Control does a national scan in the United States every few years. This is from the 2016 data, studying about 70,000 adults across the US. Just a couple of real quick takeaways from this. First of all is that about 36% of the population has an A score of 0. What that really means is that most of the people in our communities, 2/3 of the adults, have an A score of 1 or higher. The other thing is that the adverse childhood experiences produces what's referred to as a dosage effect. The higher the number of adversities, the higher prevalence of these adverse outcomes. What I'll say is that the average ACE score nationally is a 1.61 out of 10. So what I want to talk about is the research that I've been doing and thinking about the children in your school systems. So for instance, again, the national average is a 1.61. I do the national research on children exposed to domestic violence, and we study about 2,000 children every summer. And these children have an average ACE score of over a 4. By the way, the average age of these kids is 10 years old. So very young children, very high trauma. And so our framework has always been based upon the idea of what does a rage-filled youth become? And so we have to find strategies to interrupt that process. The adjudicated youth, average ACE score, again, over a 4. Foster youth in our state, again, I get to do the research for our foster youth who are aging out. So what I want to highlight is that while the national average shows that score of a 1.61, the children in our schools are increasingly becoming a much higher rate of adversity. And so that has really led us to a better sort of emerging framework of trauma-informed practice, trauma-informed care. And the only reason I want to really bring this up and then transition is because what I want to highlight is that oftentimes we think about trauma-informed care from the framework of the students being served or clients being served. But when we think about trauma-informed care, it also includes faculty and staff who are providing services to high trauma youth. So trauma-informed care is about taking care of both clients as well as service providers.